Sarah Ferguson has just shattered the royal family's carefully constructed silence. In a revelation that's sending shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, the Duchess of York has exposed a secret agreement between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew that threatens to destroy what's left of the monarchy's credibility. The Duchess's bombshell. November 2025 will be remembered as the month Sarah Ferguson finally broke her silence. For years, the Duchess of York had been the royal family's most unpredictable member, the woman who knew too much and said too little. But on a cold Wednesday afternoon just 5 minutes ago, everything changed. In an unscheduled appearance that caught even her closest advisors off guard, Sarah stepped before cameras and revealed something that has left royal watchers across the globe absolutely stunned. The setting was deliberate. Not Buckingham Palace, not Kensington, but a modest townhouse in Mayfair where Sarah has been quietly residing since her separation from official royal duties. The choice of location spoke volumes. This wasn't sanctioned. This wasn't approved. This was Sarah Ferguson, the woman who has survived scandal after scandal, deciding that enough was finally enough. What she revealed was nothing short of explosive. A secret agreement, a pact made in the shadows. An arrangement between two of the most controversial figures in modern royal history, Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew. Two people who on the surface couldn't seem more different. But according to Sarah, they've been working together for far longer than anyone imagined. The agreement, as Sarah described it, was forged in the aftermath of Andrew's catastrophic Newsnight interview in November 2019. That interview, you'll remember, was supposed to clear his name regarding his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Instead, it became a public relations disaster that forced him to step back from royal duties. What the public didn't know, what the palace worked tirelessly to conceal, was that Meghan Markle reached out to Andrew in the weeks following that interview. Sarah's revelation paints a picture that's both calculated and chilling. According to the Duchess, Meghan saw an opportunity in Andrew's downfall. She saw a man who was desperate, isolated, and in need of allies. But more importantly, she saw someone who possessed what she needed most: insider knowledge, royal secrets, and a willingness to break ranks with the institution that had cast him aside. The agreement was simple on its surface, but devastating in its implications. Meghan would provide Andrew with public sympathy, strategically placed media support, and access to her growing network of celebrity allies and media contacts. In return, Andrew would share information, details about palace operations, insights into family dynamics, ammunition that could be used when the time was right. Sarah's voice trembled as she described discovering this arrangement. She spoke of finding encrypted messages, of overhearing phone conversations that didn't quite add up, of watching Andrew's demeanor shift whenever Meghan's name was mentioned. For months, she said, she convinced herself she was imagining things. After all, what possible connection could exist between her ex-husband and the woman who had married into the family and then so dramatically departed? But the evidence became impossible to ignore. Sarah described a meeting that took place in early 2020, just weeks before Meghan and Harry announced their intention to step back from royal duties. Andrew, she claims, traveled to Canada under the guise of a private trip. The official story was that he needed time away from the British media circus. The reality, according to Sarah, was a face-to-face meeting with Meghan at a secluded estate on Vancouver Island. What was discussed at that meeting remains partially unclear, but Sarah pieced together enough from Andrew's subsequent behavior to understand its significance. The agreement was being solidified, terms were being finalized, and both parties were preparing for what would become one of the most tumultuous periods in modern royal history. The timing of Sarah's revelation is crucial. It comes just days after renewed scrutiny of both Andrew and Meghan. Andrew's attempts to rehabilitate his public image have stalled repeatedly. Each effort met with public outcry and media skepticism. Meanwhile, Meghan's own relationship with the royal family remains fractured despite occasional rumors of reconciliation. Sarah's decision to speak now suggests she believes the public deserves to know the truth. Consequences be damned. But there's something else at play here. Something Sarah alluded to but didn't fully explain. She spoke of protecting her daughters Beatrice and Eugenie from being caught in the crossfire of what she called a game that's gone too far. She mentioned threats that had been made, though she wouldn't elaborate. She on their nature or source, and she made it clear that her decision to come forward wasn't made lightly. The palace's response has been swift and predictable. Within minutes of Sarah's statement, official sources were dismissing her claims as categorically false and the product of a troubled imagination. But those who know Sarah, those who've watched her navigate the treacherous waters of royal life for nearly 4 decades, aren't so quick to dismiss her words. This is a woman who's made mistakes, certainly who's been humiliated publicly and struggled privately. But she's also a woman who's proven herself remarkably resilient and when pushed surprisingly truthful, a pact forged in scandal. To understand how this secret agreement came to be, we need to travel back to November 2019. Prince Andrew's interview with Emily Maitlis on BBC's Newsnight was meant to be his redemption arc. Instead, it became a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis. His inability to express regret, his bizarre alibi about being at Pizza Express in Woking, his claim that he couldn't sweat due to an overdose of adrenaline during the Falklands War. All of it combined to create a public relations catastrophe of historic proportions. Within days, Andrew was forced to step back from public duties. Sponsors abandoned his charitable initiatives. Institutions scrambled to distance themselves from him. He became effectively a royal in exile within his own family. The Queen stood by him as mothers do. But even her support couldn't shield him from the relentless criticism and mockery that followed. Now imagine being Meghan Markle during this same period. She was facing her own battles with the British press, feeling isolated within the royal family and planning her eventual departure from royal duties. But she was also strategic, calculating, and keenly aware of how power works within institutions. According to Sarah's account, Meghan recognized something crucial about Andrew's situation. A desperate man is a useful man. The initial contact, Sarah claims, came through intermediaries. Meghan's team reached out to people close to Andrew with expressions of sympathy and support. The messages were subtle at first, comments about how unfairly he'd been treated, observations about the double standards within the palace, suggestions that they both understood what it meant to be scapegoated by an institution more concerned with its image than with truth or justice. Andrew, humiliated and angry, was receptive. Here was someone who seemed to understand his position, someone who wasn't lecturing him or distancing herself from him. The fact that she was also married to his nephew, that she was herself becoming increasingly alienated from the family only made the connection more appealing. They shared, or so it seemed, a common enemy. By early 2020, the relationship had evolved from sympathetic messages to active coordination. Sarah described finding evidence of regular communication between Andrew's phone and unknown numbers that she later traced back to Meghan's team. The conversations weren't just personal. They were strategic. They discussed palace vulnerabilities. They shared information about internal family tensions. They coordinated their public statements in ways designed to maximum impact and minimum accountability. The Vancouver meeting that Sarah referenced was the culmination of months of careful planning. Andrew's trip was arranged with extraordinary discretion. He used private transportation. He stayed at properties owned by mutual acquaintances and he met with Meghan at a location chosen specifically for its isolation and security. What they discussed during those hours together has been the subject of intense speculation, but Sarah's sources suggest several key topics were addressed. First, there was the matter of mutual protection. Both Andrew and Meghan faced intense media scrutiny and public criticism. Both felt betrayed by the institution they'd served. The agreement included provisions for defending each other publicly when opportunities arose, strategic leaks to sympathetic journalists, coordinated social media campaigns, behind-scenes pressure on media outlets to soften their coverage. Second, there was information sharing. Andrew possessed decades of insider knowledge about how the royal family operated. He understood the palace's pressure points, its secrets, its vulnerabilities. Meghan, meanwhile, had her own insights into the current state of affairs and access to a global media network that Andrew lacked. The exchange of information benefited both parties, but it also created a dangerous dynamic. Each now possessed ammunition that could be used against the other if the relationship soured. Third, and perhaps most troubling, there was discussion of future coordination. According to Sarah's account, Andrew and Meghan discussed scenarios in which they might need to act together. Potential crises that could be exploited, moments when the palace would be particularly vulnerable. The conversations weren't just reactive. They were planning for contingencies that hadn't yet occurred. The agreement was never written down, at least not in any formal sense. Both parties were too clever for that, but it existed nonetheless. An understanding between two people who felt they'd been wronged and were determined to level the playing field. What they didn't anticipate was that someone was watching. Someone was taking notes. Someone would eventually decide that the game had gone too far. Sarah Ferguson's decision to remain silent for so long is understandable when you consider her position. She was still technically part of the royal family. Still dependent on their goodwill for her lifestyle and her daughter's positions. Speaking out meant risking everything, but it also meant watching Andrew dig himself deeper into a hole. Watching him make alliances that could only end badly. and watching the institution she'd once been part of tear itself apart from within. The breaking point Sarah suggested came recently. She wouldn't provide specific details, but she indicated that the agreement between Andrew and Meghan had evolved into something more dangerous than either of them intended. Plans were being made. Actions were being coordinated. And Sarah realized that staying silent was no longer an option. Not if she wanted to protect her daughters from being caught in the inevitable explosion. Meghan's calculated move. Understanding Meghan Markle's motivation for entering into this secret agreement requires examining her position in late 2019 and early 2020. This was a woman who'd entered the royal family with enormous optimism and global support, only to find herself increasingly isolated and under attack. The British tabloid press had turned on her with a ferocity that shocked even seasoned royal watchers. Her relationship with senior royals, particularly William and Catherine, had deteriorated significantly, and her husband, while supportive, seemed unable to fully protect her from the institution's demands and expectations. Meghan has always been strategic. Her career in Hollywood required it. Her navigation of social circles required it, and her approach to royal life, despite what critics might say, demonstrated a clear understanding of power dynamics and media manipulation. The decision to reach out to Andrew wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. It was based on a clear assessment of what she needed and who could provide it. What Meghan needed most in late 2019 was leverage. She and Harry were already planning their exit from senior royal duties, but they needed insurance. They needed information that could protect them if the palace decided to retaliate. They needed allies, even unlikely ones, who understood how the institution operated from the inside. Andrew, for all his flaws and scandals, possessed exactly what Meghan required. The genius of Meghan's approach was its subtlety. She didn't make demands. She didn't threaten. She simply offered sympathy and understanding at a moment when Andrew was receiving neither from anyone else in his family. She positioned herself as someone who'd also been mistreated, who understood what it meant to be the family scapegoat, who knew the pain of public humiliation and institutional betrayal. But beneath the sympathy was calculation. Every conversation was an opportunity to gather information. Every expression of support was designed to deepen Andrew's trust and willingness to share. Meghan understood something crucial about human psychology.